Melbourne, quite famously, has the largest urban tram network in the world, with a total system length of around 250 kilometers. With that said though, most of this network is well over a century old, and it really hasn't seen that many changes or extensions in recent decades. This all means that while it retains that title for now, other cities are starting to catch up. Paris's quite modern tramway network, for example, recently opened its T14 tram line, bringing the total length of that system to over 190 kilometers. That's still quite a bit behind Melbourne's 250, but given Paris's tram network only opened in the 1990s, it's clearly growing fast, so it's not inconceivable that it could eventually overtake Melbourne. However, Melbourne does seem to be doing something about this, with the Victorian Government recently releasing plans for the construction of 2 new tramways in the Fishermans Bend precinct. Now, the motivation of the Victorian Government for these plans is obviously not just to maintain Melbourne's position at the top of the tram network leaderboard, even if I personally think it's a pretty cool record to have and one that they should try and keep. Instead, the real purpose behind these new tramways would be to connect up what is planned to be the largest urban renewal precinct in Australia. So in this video, we're going to be looking at what routes these new tramways will be taking, as well as how these routes differ from some previous iterations of this plan. We'll also look at why these tram connections will be so important to the Fishermans Bend precinct, and what they'll mean for Melbourne's tram network as a whole. Hi all, I'm CityMoose and I make videos about transport and urbanism, so if that sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can also check out my Ko-fi, it is always greatly appreciated. Firstly though, what is the Fishermans Bend Urban Renewal Precinct, and why is it important enough to justify the construction of new tram lines? Personally, I'd like it if new tram lines were being built regularly, but given they aren't, there must be something quite special about this project, and that really just does come down to the whole largest urban renewal precinct in Australia thing. Fishermans Bend sits along the Yarra River just southwest of Melbourne's central business district, and has historically been quite an industrial area. However, as Melbourne's population has grown, land near the city centre has become increasingly desirable, and many have looked at the very substantial amount of land in Fishermans Bend and wondered if industry is really its best use. Across many cities in Australia, recent decades have seen inner city industrial areas redeveloped into residential and commercial ones, with the industry moving to the city outskirts. So why not do the same with Fishermans Bend? And this is basically what happened, starting in 2012 when then Planning Minister Matthew Guy rezoned about 250 hectares of the precinct from industrial to mixed use. This rezoning was a smidge controversial at the time, but it did kickstart this urban renewal project that has now grown to over 480 hectares and is expected to house up to 80,000 people and create up to 80,000 new jobs by the year 2050. To do this, Fishermans Bend will be split into 5 new suburbs: Lorimer, Montague, Sandridge and Wirraway, which will primarily be mixed-use residential, and then a 5th area currently titled the National Employment and Innovation Cluster, which is meant to be a hub for advanced manufacturing anchored by a new campus of the University of Melbourne. Now, if 80,000 new workers and residents are added to this precinct, they are going to need a way to move around it, and having all these people drive would undoubtedly be a disaster for traffic in the area. So then, what about public transport? Well, the existing public transport options in the area are quite basic, and just limited to a few bus services. However, with the plans for Fishermans Bend, this could change substantially. The plans unveiled in the Victorian Government's most recent integrated transport plan break the transport initiatives for the area into 3 horizons. The first horizon will focus on improving the cycling and pedestrian facilities in the area while also providing some enhancements to the local buses and some of the existing tram services. These improvements will be welcome, but alone they wouldn't be enough to support the area's ambitious targets. And this is where Horizons 2 and 3 come in. While Horizon 2 will continue its pedestrian and cycling improvements with a new active transport connection over the Yarra River, it will also see the area get connected up with the tram network. Horizon 3 will then even see the area potentially get 2 new underground train stations as part of Metro Tunnel 2, but that's a project I've already covered in a separate video. Focusing on the tramways though, and in this version of the integrated transport plan, the first horizon would see increases in capacity for the existing tram services running along the old Port Melbourne Railway alignment, aka Route 109, which will help support the development of the Montague area. But in Horizon 2, whole new tramways will be added, and these will start with a branch at Ingalls Street that will support the Sandridge area, before reaching Fennell Street, where the line will branch again. The northern of these two branches will then continue up Ingle Street to cross the Westgate Freeway to enter Lorimer, before it turns onto Turner Street to head westward through the National Employment and Innovation Cluster before terminating somewhere along Westgate Park. The southern branch would instead run along Fennell Street before reaching Bridge Street, where it will make a slight turn onto Plummer Street, which will head down linking up the Wirraway area. At the end of Plummer Street, it will turn onto Prohaski Street, which will run down before terminating at Williamstown Road. Looking a bit further towards Horizon 3, we can even see how this network would integrate with the Metro Tunnel too, especially the southern branch, which would directly connect with its proposed Sandridge station. Overall, while we don't yet know exactly where the tram stops along these routes would be, I think we can see, just from these alignments, that these two new tramways would do a pretty good job providing coverage to the various suburbs that would make up the Fishermans Bend development, with essentially every part of these suburbs being within easy walking distance of a tram line. This would go a long way to encouraging people living or working in these areas to choose public or active transport rather than driving. So in that way, these alignments are great. However, I do have some concerns with them. The main one being about capacity. If built, these tramways would connect with the Old Port Melbourne Railway tramway, which in turn connects with the tramway over Spencer Street Bridge. Currently, this bridge carries 3 tram routes, the 12, the 96 and the 109. But if these plans go ahead, this will likely increase to 5. The 96 and 109 are already the 2 busiest tram lines in Melbourne, so I would be a bit worried that the bridge could very quickly hit capacity if all these new services are added to it. This would be helped a bit by the Metro Tunnel 2 plans, as a lot of people would travel via that instead of the tram, reducing pressure on these routes. But I can't help but think that the earlier version of these tram plans could have been even better. In the original versions of the Integrated Transport Plan, instead of branching off the Old Port Melbourne Railway tramway, the new tram routes would have just been extensions of one of the tramways in Docklands. There were a few options considered for how this could be done, but the one I found most sensible would have seen the Collins Street tramway at Victoria Harbour extended across the Yarra along a new bridge, after which it would branch into routes much the same as the ones proposed in the current transport plan, with a northern one running along Turner Street and a southern one running along Plummer Street. This would have avoided some of the capacity issues, as it could have just been an extension of the existing services using the Collins Street tram line, rather than a branch adding completely new services that need to compete for space with the current ones. It helps that the Docklands section of the Collins Street tramway carries 2 tram routes, the 11 and 48, which conveniently matches up with the number of branches on the Fisherman's Bend side. Now, this option did of course come with some challenges. Notably, it would have needed the construction of a new bridge over the Yarra, which probably would have needed to be an openable bridge, as that section of the river handles taller boats. As such, that bridge would have been costly, estimates put it at over $200 million, and it faced significant local opposition, as these things tend to do. That said, in the current plans, a bridge roughly in this area is still planned, just as a presumably cheaper pedestrian/cycling one. Given a bridge is going to be built anyway, I think the government might as well spend the money to make it a tram one. I even think making it a non-openable one could be considered to keep the costs lower. It would really only affect a single marina, and I don't see why the affected boats couldn't just be relocated. Regardless, it looks like there is still a fair bit of time before decisions like these need to be finalised, because even with the release of the latest integrated transport plan, there is still no date set yet for construction of these tram routes to start. This is despite these tram lines having been in the planning stages for years, and despite Infrastructure Victoria having labelled a tram line to Fishermans Bend as, quote, most urgent, and recommended its delivery by 2026, a date that will clearly not be hit. I am hoping, however, that with the release of this latest plan, this can start to change. The Fishermans Bend precinct has the potential to provide a significant boost to housing supply in Melbourne, but for it to do so successfully, it needs good transport links. On top of that, I also just want to see Melbourne start investing in its tram network more. It's an amazing system, but has been a bit neglected in recent decades, so I hope these extensions can be catalysts for renewed investment across the network. In many ways, cities and their transport networks are a bit like us. They are worth continually investing in and improving. Just like it's worth spending time developing a city's railways, it's also worth time focusing on yourself and improving the way you think and problem solve. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant, comes in. Brilliant is an interactive learning platform that helps you become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of lessons across math, science, programming, and data. Importantly, these lessons aren't just lectures, instead you learn by doing, so solving puzzles, exploring models, and visually seeing how ideas fit together, which not only makes the learning more effective, but also just surprisingly fun. When I'm not making these videos, I work as an app designer, and I've been taking Brilliant's Programming with Python course to better understand the other side of app development. And this course is giving me hands-on experience with real programming, while helping me develop an intuition for computer logic. Brilliant's lessons are crafted by experts from places like MIT and Google, and they're designed to keep you on track with daily encouragement and engaging programs that make your learning stick. So if you want to give your brain a daily workout, head to brilliant.org/citymoose or scan the QR code on screen. You can start learning for free, and Brilliant is giving my viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription. Again, that's brilliant.org/citymoose if you'd like to give it a go. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can check out my Ko-fi, it is always greatly appreciated. But with that all said, I'm Kyle, aka City Moose, and as always, thanks for watching.